Hey guys, welcome to the Uncommodified podcast and to another UNCORK conversation. My favorite conversations because this one's being done at night, which means it might be whiskey time, and whiskey time is a great time for me. Tonight, I just want to welcome to the show a friend of mine, Richard Stanley. Richard, thanks for joining me.
Great to be here.
Awesome. Really, it's a privilege to be able to sit down and chat with you. And we've got some stories I think we'll tell tonight, and we'll figure this out as we go along. But just as it relates to the sort of macro subject, if you're listening in, what we want to talk about is, and this will tip into Richard's background and what he is just absolutely brilliant at, in my opinion, maybe not his opinion, but my opinion. And really what we want to talk about is Richard has had an amazing career doing something that's very powerful. And I want to explore what you've learned, Richard, about taking organizations, taking people from inefficiency to efficiency, from losing money to making money, and from an unhealthy culture to a healthy culture. And so that's the conversation that we're going to have tonight. And by way of introduction, I want to introduce you to Richard and a little bit of his background so you can understand the context in which he approaches this subject. So I had the privilege of meeting you, Richard. I think it was around 2014. I think around that time was the first time I met you. My son Chris was a marketing manager at the company that you own, and that's how we got introduced, which was a great opportunity for me. And after that, I had the opportunity to begin to work with you and your team, and that was just a great ride for me, and still have great relationship with your team. And so first of all, I want to say thanks for allowing me to partner with you and your team over the years, because it's been an amazing pleasure.
It's been great getting to know you, and you added a lot to our company and our team.
Well, I appreciate that. And so here's Richard's background. So Richard currently is the president of Bartell Global. He's also the president and CEO of Precision Metalworks. Those companies are really under the Bartell Global family of companies. And Richard, for over 35 years now, has really been applying his craft of organizational leadership and focusing on business plant turnaround, startups, process improvement. That's Richard's world. Now, prior to joining Bartell in 2007, he became part of the ownership structure of Bartell. He held a variety of positions in this sphere. I think you were the VP and then the CEO of the Ventura Group, which was a publicly traded company. How many manufacturing plants did that company have? Do you remember?
26 plants in 9 countries to almost 10,000 employees.
Amazing. And so this is big capacity stuff, big manufacturing. This is the world that Richard comes from. In addition, lots of other positions over the years, president and COO at Shelby Die Casting. I think you spent some time in TRW facilities in Ontario, in Tennessee. I think you were in Mexico as well.
Mexico, yep.
Mexico, Arizona.
Yeah.
Did your family go everywhere with you on this journey, Richard?
Yeah, my wife's a saint, so I destroyed my kids, and no, it was an adventure, that's for sure.
I know. I think you know what I remember. I think Will recounted one time. Will is one of your sons, and
Yeah.
I think Will recounted a time when he said he went to the airport and he didn't even know it was you.
Yikes. Yep. Unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. Now, here's the great story. After all that, you got a great family. You've been married to an amazing woman, Mary Ellen, for a long time, I think.
36 years.
36 years, and she still puts up with you. How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And then you have 3 great children. You've got 2 of your children are married. You've got some grandchildren. How many grandchildren do you got now?
2 and 1 on the way.
Awesome. Grandchildren are awesome, are they not,
They
Richard?
are awesome.
It's so
You get to do all the things you wish you'd done when you were a parent.
You do. And the other day, you know Jude, my grandson. The other day, we were at their house, and I think I was losing my shit about something I shouldn't. I think, and he says to me, "Papa, don't sweat the small stuff." I said, "What?" He said, "Don't sweat the small stuff." I said,
Wisdom.
"Yeah, you know what, Jude? That's the wisdom coming out of children, isn't it?"
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, now I think you also did some other things, and I love this find. So you were a sheep farmer, were you not?
Yeah, I was a sheep farmer. I was a church planter.
That's right.
We took an old crack house and turned it into a community center for youth and artists, and a coffee house. It was awesome. Yep.
Awesome. No, and And that's also something I really appreciate about you, Richard. Not only are you a tremendous businessman, not only are you super focused on the work you've done from efficiency perspective and profitability, but you understand that it is all about people. I know that you and your family, and give back to the communities that you work in. That story that you just mentioned about that crack house that you bought, I think in the city that you may have grown up in or had connection with. I mean, that's an amazing story about who you are and how you look at the world. And I want to make sure that, although we weren't going to talk about a lot of that about tonight, I want people to know that you're more than just the sum of this conversation around efficiency and productivity in plants. And that's something that I have deep respect and appreciation for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So listen, I know that you love a few things. You love a good story, although I think your partner John says don't let the facts interrupt a good story, something like that. You love a good cigar. You love to sit around a fire and have a whiskey. Now, unfortunately, no fire, no cigar tonight, but there is whiskey in our future because this is an uncorked conversation, and
Awesome.
all great conversations start with a whiskey. So, what do you have? What are you drinking?
I have a Lagavulin.
Of course, you do.
Yeah.
16-year-old.
This is the only one I could find was an 8. So
what? Okay.
Up here in the north, they don't have as big a selection.
Fair enough. I'm going with a 15-year-old Dalwhinnie tonight. It's a good staple Scotch in the cabinet.
Yeah. Lovely.
I want to open that one up, and we've shared a few whiskeys and cigars over the years, I believe.
Yep.
In several different countries and maybe on different continents, all over the place.
Cheers.
Cheers to you, sir. Really appreciate it. So listen, let's dive in. Sometimes my listeners probably say, hey, can you get to it a little quicker? And I say, oh, no, you know what? I got to have some fun first to get this ball rolling. So listen, let's dive into this conversation. Every great conversation for me, and most of them, they start with a drink. It's not always whiskey, but often. And it starts with a great question, because a great question unlocks, and creates the container that we're going to have the conversation in. And so when we talk about this idea of taking organizations from inefficiency to efficiency, from losing money to making money, from unhealthy cultures to healthy cultures, as you begin to walk out your life as Richard Stanley, when do you first figure out, and how do you figure out that you have a passion and a skill for this thing? How does that find you in your life?
Yeah, I think with many things in life, these things sometimes happen to us. So I loved building things. I liked fixing things. I liked problem solving when I was a kid, but I had no concept that there was such a thing as an efficiency person that focused on these things. I can remember I was extremely bored with high school, and I dropped out. In Ontario, when I was going to high school, you had to go to the 13th grade if you wanted to go on to a 4-year post-secondary. And so I had dropped out of high school partway through grade 13. A friend came by and said, hey, Richard, jump in the truck. I'm going into Toronto. We're going to go to see some schools. And he says, I said, well, what are you going to go look at? I think I was digging a fence post hole. And so it sounded like a good idea to me. And he said, I'm going to go see this thing called industrial engineering. And I said, what's that? And he said, it's got something to do with people, process, and capital, and how they all work together, and how you can make them the most efficient that you can in combining people, process, and capital. And for some reason, that just clicked. I immediately went back to high school. I finished up my year. I got accepted into school and did an engineering 4-year engineering degree in that. And then fortunately, I just had some people that allowed me to do things, that I could learn, that I could make mistakes, that I could see how that combination of looking at people and process and capital and how can you make those most efficient. I just got lots of opportunities to take risks and make mistakes and have successes. And the more I did of it, the more I was asked to do it, and the more I enjoyed it, and the more I began to form a discipline around understanding how to do it and try and do it well.
Now, your original sort of experience, so TRW, I think that's the right acronym, right? That's automotive related, correct?
Right.
So at what point did you find yourself in, because you spent a lot of time in that automotive world. So how,
Yeah,
after you graduated, how did you find yourself there?
that was the job that I got hired into right out of school.
Okay.
I graduated, I think I graduated the first week of May. I started in automotive at a seatbelt company up in Collingwood, Ontario. I started there at Bendix Safety Restraints, making seatbelts with about 700 ladies, sewing and making seatbelts. And I was the only industrial engineer there. And I just got an opportunity a real opportunity to study, see how processes work, see how people are interacting with them, and try to begin to change those to make them more efficient.
Interesting. Now, obviously, probably even myself, who I'm not that bright and I haven't gone to school for the things you've gone to and had experience, there's certain inefficiencies I can probably spot a mile away. That's easy. But my question to you is that when you think of inefficiencies that you see, or poor return on investment, or all of these things you start to see, what are some of the less obvious signs that someone like yourself may see that I may not see because of how you look at it and the experience that you've had?
Yeah, I think over the years, what you learn is refine your observation ability. When you go in, don't immediately go to the data, don't immediately go to the spreadsheets and the financials. Just observe, walk around the organization, see how people interact with each other, see how the machines work, see how the processes function, look at it. And what I often tell people is just tune yourself into saying what seems awkward,
Hmm.
what doesn't feel right, what doesn't look right, so is it a conversation, is it the way people work together, is it the way there's downtime, is it the amount of scrap bins, is it the quality, that just observe what's going on. I often say I got to go to my first dance in grade 8. Other people were going in grade 6, but my mom didn't want me to go to dances. So I got to go, and I got the courage. I asked a girl to dance Stairway to Heaven's on. I'm dancing with her. And of course, about 60% into the song, a really awkward moment comes where it speeds up. And I didn't know what to do. And that awkwardness always reminds me when I'm in a business and people can't work together, or there's unhealthy competition, or there's ineffective communication, or there's processes, that awkward feeling that you get when this is not right. I don't know why this isn't working. Pay attention to that, because that's where most likely the inefficiencies are, the awkward things.
That's really practical wisdom. And again, listen, if you're listening in today, and again, this, heavy manufacturing or process may not be your world, or it might be, but it's a great general idea. Think about all the systems, all the things you're connected with, whether it's business, whether it's community systems, whether it's family systems. I guess it's any system where people and processes come together. Look for that awkwardness. When you feel it, maybe there's something inside of it. It reminds me, Richard, when I first started my consulting career years ago, I had the privilege of working with at that time, I was a publisher of a business magazine. It was one of the only times in my life that I worked for somebody as an employee. I worked for Southam, and I ran a business magazine in Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge, and Guelph. And we had a consultant come from Disney. His name was D.B. Scott, and he had a big cigar, he had a trench coat, the whole thing. It was hilarious. And it was the early 80s. And he took a liking to me. I was 21 years old, and he said to me one day, "I'm going to teach you the secret of being a great consultant in this business or any business." And he was from New York. He was hilarious. And I said, "What's that, DB?" And he said, "In every business, there's a pile of stuff. It's a pile of shit. It's called the way we do it." And he said, "All you need to do is scratch underneath that, and you're always going to find 10 to 15% efficiency. It's inside the pile of shit." And maybe that's what you're talking about. It's that awkward shit that you go, "Hey, there's something wrong in there, and maybe we can find something."
Right.
Interesting.
And look for it. train your eyes to see it, and you'll start to see it everywhere.
Yeah, that's very good. So so look for that awkwardness. That's the one sign that maybe isn't it quite, it's not as obvious to some people. Is there anything else that, from your experience, sort of gets your nose in the air where you say, I'm smelling something that I think there's something in here that we got to look at?
Yeah, and so that awkwardness can go to the Japanese of they've got you can look up all kinds of stuff on what they've identified. They've nailed it down to the seven aspects of waste, and so they get really scientific. But it all turns back to that. So, are there too many quality problems? Are there too many issues happening, whether it's communications with customers, or are things falling through the cracks? Are we shipping things incorrectly? So anything that has to do with shipping problems, or handling things too much, or moving things around too much, or overproducing, or all of those kinds of wastes are in every aspect of your business, whether you're in banking, or whether you're in manufacturing, or whether you're in telecommunications, whatever it is, those things are there. And how can you root them out, find them, and then begin to solve the problem together as an organization?
Interesting. So when you look at this connectivity, when we talk about organizations, obviously those organizations are people, although those machines, stamp metal or do things and operate maybe 24 hours a day with some downtime, at the end of the day, most of these systems, are under the control of humans. There's people involved. So when you look at process problems, are they always ultimately people problems, or can they be distinguished, or do they most often nest inside of each other?
I had a mentor early on who told me, Richard, if there's an efficiency problem, it's going to always be a leadership problem.
Interesting.
So if there's inefficiency in an organization, start by looking at yourself. Start by looking at your leaders and the way they help the organization understand, track, look for it. What goals are they setting? How are they communicating? How are they solving problems? The natural inclination is to look to the machine or the person, or the lack of money.
Yep.
And the leaders need to look at themselves and say, what's our culture? How am I organizing that? What am I doing with that? And how do people know how they're doing, what they're doing, and how they can help the organization succeed?
Well, yeah, and that's brilliant wisdom. And I know, one thing I would say, and my listeners, some of them may know you, Richard, some of them won't, but the one thing I have deep respect for is that is very consistent and congruent with the message you always brought inside my connection with you, whether it was at Bartell or Precision, or the companies that you bought over the years and integrated. That is something you have always been consistent on. You have always said, if there's problems, it's a leader problem first. Leaders go first. And so again, if you're listening, that's a really great challenge. It's one thing to look for inefficiency in systems or processes or your own people or the world or your government or your community. But if the inefficiency exists in you, the only way we're going to eradicate it is start with us. And it sounds simple, but it's so much easier to fix the inefficiencies of others, or want to. But that's a great reminder. And it's a good challenge for me, again, Richard, thinking about this, because that, Winston Churchill said the price of leadership is responsibility.
Right.
It's a responsibility for these things that we ultimately have in our hands. So tremendously powerful wisdom. So again, if you're a leader, and you could be a leader in a business, or you could be a leader in your family. You could be a stay-at-home mom. You could be a stay-at-home dad. You could be a stay-at-home grandpa. You could be a CEO of a multinational company. Is there an efficiency in you? And what are you going to do about it? Great question.
Yep.
Great question. So when you start to look at these systems, how does culture, so when we think of culture, and, what do you view as culture? What is culture to you, and what are the signs of an unhealthy culture, and how does that impact this discussion?
Culture. the beauty is every organization has a unique culture. It's the way people interact with each other. It's the way people understand their responsibilities and what they're to do and how they work together in trying to how they communicate, how they email, how they work, what they believe is their job. It's all of that understanding, and every organization I've ever been in has a unique one. So there isn't a standard culture that you want, but I think there's some underlying disciplines or some underlying aspects of an organization's culture that if you want to begin to move towards efficiency and move towards a more effective organization, that you have to consider. And those are the things that you would try and focus on if you were going to go into an organization and say, hey, we need a change here.
Okay. So what are some signs for you when you go into an organization and you begin that experience, as you said, of seeing what seems awkward and walking around and watching the environment? What are the kind of things that immediately tell you this has an unhealthy sense to it? This is a system that has disease or problem.
Yeah, so let me give you an example. One of the companies that I have gone into lately had come out of bankruptcy protection. It then spent the next 10 years losing money and was probably 3 or 4 months away from going bankrupt. And I was asked to just come in and have a look at it. I spent 2 days just walking around looking for those awkward moments, looking for those inefficiencies. And I strongly believed that while it only had 3 or 4 months left, that it could be fixed and it could be turned around so that it was a successful company. But the things that I clearly saw was that nobody, first of all, nobody knew what the problem was. Nobody understood. And so it seems like a simple thing, but if you can clearly and articulately describe a problem, what the problem is or what the problems are, you are well on your way to fixing it. The problem is we never get around to being able to articulate it in a really concise manner. What is the problem? The next is, can you communicate that in a way that everyone starts to grasp it? So for example, in this company, we were having a conversation and the conversation, I said, pull everybody together. And I said, let me paint you a picture. This company is like somebody who has been in a massive car accident. They're bleeding to death. The ambulance has arrived. They're being rushed to the hospital. And I asked all the employees on the floor, employees in the offices, engineers, maintenance people, I said, does everybody get what happens if we can't stop the bleeding? And everybody in the crowd said, we die. And I said, we die, we bleed to death. And so being able to communicate in a clear enough way and basically say, hey guys, are we all on board? I'm not a magician. I can't fix this thing by myself. If we're not all on board to fix this thing together, I can't do it myself. But if you're not here with me, we're not going to save this company. And everybody said, yeah, let's do it. I said, it could be painful. There may be some difficult things as you would have to do. So what's the problem? Clearly articulate it. Communicate so that everybody can grasp what the issues are. And then what's the score? How do I know if I'm doing well? So are there a set of common goals? Have you narrowed it down to the things that are absolutely fundamental, not tangential, not nice to haves, but what are those fundamental things that will make you a successful organization? And then can you define them? And can you set goals in them? And can you work towards them? And then are you meeting and working towards those things? Are you communicating on them regularly? Are you assigning responsibilities? Are you encouraging people to become planners so that they're really thinking through the priorities of their day? What am I doing with it? How am I going to do it? What help do I need? Who's going to give me help? How do I get capital or assistance or resources to do these kinds of things. And then finally, you've got to free people up to, within boundaries, but free people up to take wise risk. Let people try. Is there a consequence if they honestly try and fail, that they get their legs cut out from them? Or, hey, let's take those wise risks that lead us to success. So I don't know, those are just some of the things that
really, and I love that. That's an interesting term, not a way that I've heard that articulated before, and I really like it. Wise risk. And again, if you're listening, if you're in a car, you're not going to maybe write this down because I don't want you to have an accident. But if you're not, seriously, pause the podcast and write that down. Wise risk. What wise risk do I need to take to heal this thing, to change this, to make this better? I mean, that's a really, really simple but brilliant question. And I guess the other part of that is, do we have a culture that rewards and doesn't punish the taking of wise risk? And you talked about that as well. And that's the balancing tension. It's one thing to encourage risk, but if people know that they're going to get their head cut off anytime they take one, I suppose they're not going to take very many risks.
No, not really.
No, for sure. So I want to go back to something you said earlier, because if I understood the logic train, if I think about, unhealthy culture, and then I use the word, healing an unhealthy culture, if I think of it that way, what I heard you say in a very simple way, that the process of healing begins with the identification of the real problem that needs to be healed.
Right.
It's, and again, it's not, I suppose it's not rocket science, but why is it, do you think, that people overcomplicate this? Because it doesn't sound like it's super complicated if you really unpack it the way you have. Why do you think we overcomplicate it so much?
People love a solution. People will jump to the solution so fast. But again, unless you've articulated what the problem is, my guess is you'll be putting forward wrong solutions. They might be solving something. And so I just think people seem to avoid trying to articulate and really refining what exactly is the problem here. Could I articulate it to you so that you absolutely get it? And once it begins to resonate with people, everybody starts to say, hey, this is what we've got to do. And they'll start coming up with their own way and their own circumstances. They'll outthink you by miles, because what they're all doing is they're applying that articulation of the problem to their circumstance. And all of a sudden it begins to multiply the recovery and the improvement.
No, very, very. It reminds me of, and if you get a chance, if you're listening, go on social media and just and Google and find. I did maybe a 2-3 minute iPhone sort of social media post a number of months ago, and it was all about the idea of don't be a symptom soother, because I think that's what we're talking about. If you're just soothing symptoms, you're not solving problems. You are not moving towards efficiency, real efficiency, or really taking people from losing to making, or from unhealthy to healthy, if you're just soothing symptoms. If you're just giving, Tylenol to somebody who's got brain cancer, that is not a really great strategy for health. And maybe at the end of the day, Richard, sometimes that's what we're doing. We feel good about it, I guess, and we check a box and we say to our boss, we're doing something for the patient. But it's only soothing that symptom. It is not solving the problem.
And facing real problems is uncomfortable.
It is.
But I think I'm always amazed at the capability and the capacity of people to, once they grasp the real problem, of the ability to start to overcome that if they can work together with other people to do it.
100%. And so then I also going back, and I'm following the logic of what you said before. So again, you've got the identification of the problem, but then you talked about this importance of planning. And I know from my experience in being part of your world for a number of years as a consultant and having some very embedded opportunities, which by the way, I want to publicly thank you. One of the greatest gifts, Richard, that you gave me when I was consulting for you was a challenge for you, from you and from John Locke and other leaders at the company. Say, hey, we want you to come into this thing so you can see it differently and advise us differently. And that was an amazing gift for me. When you invited me to get down and dirty in the organization and really work very practically across your organization on the customer level, get involved, develop systems, run them myself, that was a gift. And it helped me understand that what I was saying could work and I could work it out. But in addition, it gave me those real life experiences. And so, you've got this problem, you got the practicality, and you gave me a real practical experience. And I want to say that, I really appreciated that, because I believe it's made me a better consultant, because it took me back to litmus test the things I was saying. Was this theory, these ideas that I have, was it practical enough that it could work? And I believe that we discovered it could work, but it could work in different ways for different people. So I just want to thank you publicly for challenging me and allowing me an opportunity to really get my hands dirty in your organization and learn a lot in that season of my life. So appreciate that, Richard.
And I saw you transform ideas that you had. The essence of the idea stayed the same, but as you have to say, I'm responsible now for implementing it and carrying it out, it transitions, it changes, it morphs with the situation,
100%.
and therefore becomes practical.
Yeah, it might have been Einstein that said something like, in theory, practice and theory in the same. In reality, they're not. Mm-hmm. I think he said something like that. So, yeah, brilliant statement. So again, if I track that logic back, we'll go back to the planning piece for a second. And so you instituted, if I recall, a number of years ago in your organization, a relentless focus on planning. Including made it very practical, I believe, in relationship to an initiative that you developed. So I'm assuming it was connected partly to this thing that we're talking about. So why is planning and being a great planner, and ultimately not just planning but executing on that plan, why is that so critical to this discussion today?
I think it was Winston Churchill who said that plans are of little consequence, but planning, the act of planning, the discipline of planning is essential. And so if you're going to lead in an organization, developing that discipline of planning says, hey, I'm thinking through, what are my priorities? What do we got to do? What's important? What's not important? Because today's situations may completely throw your plans out the window. But the fact that you've thought through, hey, what's really important? What's important for my organization? How am I communicating that? When am I going to communicate that? The fact that you've done that, you're going to respond to that shifting tide that happens under our feet every day as leaders. You're going to respond to that because you've thought through what's important, what's not important, what can I get rid of? What am I being asked to do that just is not worth my time? And so that's why I believe in this. I'm not saying be regimented if I said I'm going to do something. No. How are you spending time every day saying what's important today, this week, this month? What's got to get done? And are you taking 15 minutes, 20 minutes every day to say what's got to be done? What's my priority?
Yeah, and if I remember that because you created a very practical tool that you unleashed across your organization and encouraged people to use, strongly encouraged. I'm going to use the word. When Richard strongly encourages you to use something, that is code language for you better be using it, brother. But what I loved about that is I think it started in essence with, first of all, defining a sense of personal and professional mission. That was the guiding force behind making those plans real to us and real to others, and that was a great initiative. I really believe that began to turn the tide on certain things in the organization at that time, at least from my recounting of that.
Yeah, the better an organization, the better its leaders, the better more and more people become at setting their priorities and thinking through how they're practically going to do it, the more high performing your organization will become.
100%. And I guess goes back again. Apparently it's all about leaders, isn't it, Richard?
It's all about leaders.
Apparently it is. And so again, this is a great conversation. If you're listening in, just you have to figure out how to apply it to your world. Your world might be different than the world I work in. It probably is fundamentally for some of you different than the world that Richard works in. But these principles are applicable across organizational structure or organizational identity, or whether it's a political organization, a social organization, a community organization, a spiritual organization, a business organization. These I think these principles are very much well placed across that. And so again, I would challenge you to ask yourself, if you're in a system that seems inefficient, that seems awkward, if you're in a system that isn't maximizing its revenue potential, if you're in a system somehow, whatever kind of system that is unhealthy and you want to move it towards a healthy culture, it's maybe not as complicated as you think it is. Maybe it is more simple, but it is more practical, and it is more accountable. It requires you to be vested in it and looking at yourself, which is really partly what I'm taking from the conversation today, Richard. Let me ask you a question.
Just one clarification.
Yeah, please.
If your organization needs to be improved, it starts with the leaders. Mm-hmm. But make sure you never devalue any person that is filling a function in your organization. It's all about connecting all of those people in the most effective way possible, making sure they're all pulling on the same rope together.
Excellent. And I appreciate you chiming in with that, because that's so helpful. So many times my guests have to say, Tim, can you be quiet for a second? I think I've got something to add there. So you sit among many of my guests, Richard. So it's awesome. So let me ask you a question. Over your experience in this, we've talked about some things that are, maybe a little bit easier to find or simpler in nature. What is the thing that tends to be more complicated than people tend to expect it to be? What do they think is going to be easy that isn't typically?
By far the greatest magnitude, if you're going into any organization, is if you're going to try and change an ingrained culture, a culture that you can clearly see as awkward, as dysfunctional, and you'd like to lead it to health. You're in for a long game of incredible persistence and consistent leadership to model, to teach, to bring that change about. And so that will take longer than you think it will take. It always does.
Based on your experience, could you give me a sense of typically, the leaders you've worked with over the years, and maybe from your own experience as you've learned better, is it take me twice as long, 3 times as long, 10 times as long? Like
3 times as long.
3 times. So in your experience, if I think it's a 2-year culture change process, then it may be 6. Yeah. So I better strap it on and get ready.
Yep.
Interesting. Interesting.
I thought, even after, I think this is the 11th turnaround or startup that I've done, I thought that I could fix this latest company in 2 years. We are just breaking through, and we turned a profit the first year, but we haven't been healthy. We're on our 6th year, and we are starting to pick up momentum pretty well.
Interesting. So even yourself, after this long in the game, sometimes forget that it's a long game.
Yes.
It's a long game. Do you think that part of what helps you? So what sustains you in the long game? I mean, because we look for quick fixes. We want instant rewards. If we have shareholders, they want their money awful quick. They want a return on their investment. Not in 6 years from now. They want it they want it right now. What sustains you in the long game?
It is a lot of fun if you can begin to work with a group of people and you can begin to make that progress. So the encouraging part was we didn't lose the amount of money that we were supposed to lose. We didn't go bankrupt. We made money the first year. And it's then that building process of saying, hey, we are getting better, and we're getting better every year. Not as fast as we want, but it's the sustaining part is putting that team, building, being a part of it, having them impact your life and you impact theirs, and seeing people gainfully employed and businesses starting to succeed and people seeing the success. We had people there. We had a young guy that's been there since he was 17 years old, and he's there 35 years later. And just to see him say, man, this place is starting to go again. It's starting to make it. It's fun. It's hard, but it's fun to start to move from inefficiency to efficiency, and from failure to success.
Yeah, and it sounds like the fun is, it's obviously on the business side, but it sounds like a lot of that comes on the people side, watching the transformation in people, and the impact that it has not only in them, but their families and their communities, and all that cascading benefit. I'm thinking about, because I'm aware of the particular company that you're talking about, and so I'm aware of that, and I think about the first time you guys got into that journey, and some of the very difficult decisions I know that you had to make early on, which had a huge people impact. I remember talking to you on your way down when you were making some very difficult decisions to address problems. And to see now where you've come, the human impact is absolutely palpable.
Yeah. And so you can have that. It goes back to the beginning of industrial engineering, where it's a people, process, capital. Yeah, you can get the capital return, and you can create enriching lives for people. You can do them both.
That's awesome. And again, if you're listening in, that's just a great encouragement. Don't trade one for the other. I mean, and that's a bad trade-off. At the end of the day,
it's a bad trade-off.
That's not a good trade-off. And that's one thing. Again, I have tremendous respect for you, Richard, and your partner John, and other people who in your organization, senior leaders throughout your companies, because I do know that's a core value for you. Right. And that, to me, again, just speaks to the quality of the people you are. At the end of the day, that's why you bought a crack house and converted it for the sake of the community. So the people.
Luckily, I was surrounded by some really good people that really helped make that happen.
Yeah, hey, I got we didn't talk about this in advance, but I just got a question. So, fixing systems that are not business based. So in this case, you're a Christian pastor, and so you were on this journey, and you bought this crack house, and you did all this stuff in the community. If you're fixing systems that are not business-based, but they're community-based or spiritual systems, or communities of people, is it fundamentally different, or is it almost the same?
Very similar.
Interesting.
It's very similar. Yep.
I guess because it's got people in it. Yeah. It's got people in it.
Yep.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, listen, we're going to wrap up, and I always want to thank my listeners. And Richard, I want to remind you, as I said before, a long time ago I recorded this video that you were the star of, and I want to remind you again of the first time that we met. So, my son said we should meet, and I guess out of deference to him, you decided to meet me because you did not really have a great appreciation for the consultant. That was for sure, and you were fairly forthright about that. And again, if you check out that video on social media, you'll find out, don't be a time-stealing, watch-stealing thief. That video will tell you that. And we have this little joke that Richard and I had over the years, because I remember in that time, Richard, do you remember what you did with your watch the first time we met?
Took it off my wrist and gave it to you.
I know. And then you said something that was actually so truthful but hurtful. And because you said to me, Tim, that's what consultants do. They take the watch off my wrist, put it on theirs, tell me the time, and then charge me. And I remember the next.
And they keep your watch.
I know, but the next words out of your mouth, I don't know if you remember that day. You said to me, Tim, I know the time, and so do my leaders. And unless you bring something that's different, then you can't create value. And I tell you something, that really was powerful to me. It was hurtful at first. I was like, oh my gosh, that guy's rude. But you know what? There was such truth in that. And I know over the years we've joked about this because as we've done Zoom meetings, when I did a bunch of work for you, I remember every once in a while I take my watch off and say, "Hey, Richard, still got my watch. You got yours, brother?" So Richard, after all these years, you still got your watch?
I got it, baby.
And I got my watch too. And you know, and you've made me a better person. You've made me a better consultant. You've made me a better coach and confidant to the clients that I work with. I worked with you and your company up until last year during COVID when it just made sense that the season was finished and the opportunity that I had and what I was doing for you guys had a lot of travel involved, and obviously that was going to clamp down, and it was the right season. The great thing that I see is that it's really neat to see those leaders, and those leaders that you've brought up, young leaders. You've invested tremendously in young leaders, and again, people won't realize this, but I want to say it publicly. My son Chris, who obviously you know well, and he's talked about this on podcasts that we do. He owes his career to you and John, because you gave him an opportunity when he didn't deserve it for any other reason than you saw something and gave it to him. And I look at where he is today, and I really believe, Richard, that he is there, in a significant way because of you and John and what you did for him in those early days. And so I want to thank you on behalf of my family, on behalf of Chris, his family. Now he has 2 kids. What you did for him and the discipline that you sowed into him is absolutely bearing great fruit in his life. And so I want to thank you.
That's awesome. And that only comes because so many people invested in me and John. And that's just doing what works is finding people and giving them the opportunity to succeed.
100%. So I want to thank you. So listen, as we wrap up, I always have this question for my guests, because this podcast called the Uncommodified Podcast, it's all about this idea that, not only are things and systems possibly at times commodities, but people can become commodities. We can become those dime a dozen people that sort of fade into the background and never stand up or stand out in our worlds. My question to you is, when Richard Stanley is at his most unique, uncommodified best, when he's standing out in the crowd for a great reason, what is Richard doing so that he can make his unique mark in the world that he is working in, whatever world that is?
For a long time, I was driven by title and position. And I think if you want to be a change maker, if you want to be a difference maker, I began to learn I don't seek the leadership position. What I seek is the ability to influence. And if I can begin to influence an organization, I don't care what you call me, I don't care where you put me, but allow me to have an impact on people and to change and to influence what's going on and to make improvements and to bring people together. And so organizations are starving for people who can influence change in a unified way with other people.
Absolutely. That is an uncommodifying behavior. So, Richard, I want to give you an opportunity as we finish up to encourage or challenge our listeners. As you think about the topic that we talked about today, as you just think about where you're at in your own life, and as seasons change, and I know you're looking forward to some new seasons in your own personal life, we begin to reflect on our own experience. But if you could give an encouragement or challenge to my listeners, what would that be? I'm going to just give you an opportunity to do that, and then I'll wrap up.
If you're going to lead, if you find yourself in that influencer position or a lead position, I want to challenge you to start with yourself. There's an ancient text, Tim, that you and I are familiar with, and that text says that one ought to know oneself rightly. Not more highly than they ought to, and the inference is not more lowly than you ought to, but rightly. And so I have become a way better leader as I've understood myself, my own strengths, my own weaknesses, when I've confronted them and seen them clear in the eye, and then when I have the courage to say, do I want to do something about it? So my challenge is, if you want to lead the change, start with yourself and become a better person, a better leader, and understand why you do what you do, so that when you go to influence an organization, you can help the organization see what they do and why they do it.
Hmm. Richard, really, really appreciate that. It's great wisdom. You know, when you say that, the word that comes to me is you want to fix the system in you.
Yeah.
If you want the system to have more integrity, then have more integrity. If you want the system to have better planning, then be a better planner. If you want the system to be more efficient, be more efficient.
Start with you.
Starts with us. Absolutely. Listen, Richard, I want to thank you for your time. Listen, as we wrap up, thanks for listening today, guys. I really appreciate the gift that you give me when you listen in on the podcast. Do me a favor, as you think about and ruminate what we talked about, email me at tim@theuncommodified.com or connect with me on social media and let Richard and I know how you're uncorking this. Like we did at the beginning, we uncorked a whiskey. We drank that. We brought it in and we got to enjoy it. Enjoy this conversation, but as you do, figure out ways that you can distill this into your life and practically use what we're talking about. Have an excellent day, and thanks for listening.